Hi guys, and welcome to Faewood. So I made some altered art containers that I wanted to use for my backdrop, and I've made 4 different variations of these containers, and I thought I'd share with you how I came up with these designs so that you can make these for yourself. Now, I started off with these containers that I found from our local supermarket. They did have a hot chocolate in them, and on the top of them I wanted to have a little handle. So I bought these handles. They're little cupboard drawer pull handles that I got from eBay, and you can get them all over the place. And then my husband helped me to cut the screw on those so that they would fit perfectly on the top of these containers. So I just needed to make a little hole in the top for the screw to go through, and then screw the handle on top there. Now, to start the design, I have this gold crepe paper. For altered art, a lot of it's to do with texture. So a lot of the time you start off with a base of different materials that are really just there to create different textures in your work, and often you'll paint over them anyway, so the color that they start out doesn't always matter that much. I did leave a little of the color coming through, so I used a lot of gold for my base so that I could let that come through. I was trying to really take some of the color from the handle that I put on the top of the lid. It's actually a brassy color, but once I put the black on this gold, it will have that antique gold sort of brassy shade. I've also used some paper doilies, and then from there, my first 2 containers I made with a lot of recycled materials, so little bits of offcuts of lace. I had old bits of jewelry, and I had these little flower motif things that were made from lace as well that I took off other things. And I've used a mixture of glues to put these on. Some of it I did attach with the E6000 for the larger pieces, because E6000 glue is very strong. But for a lot of it I used the PVA. And then occasionally I've also used a Boyle's craft glue, which is just a little bit more tacky, which makes it easier if you're wanting to create something a little faster, because things will grab, and you can you don't necessarily have to wait for it to fully dry before you move on to other areas. But basically I'm just building up the design with textures with different materials. And in this first one, I wanted some of what I was using to actually show through. So I've used different pieces that have little coloured crystals on them and things, and I wanted to be able to let some of that show. And I've thought about that when I'm doing this design, and so that I pick things that I actually want to show up a little bit, and you'll see what I mean as we go a bit further. So when you're starting an altered art piece, the design might start off looking not very cohesive, quite random, lots of bits and pieces everywhere. What makes this cohesive is the painting and aspects that you do after it. And for me, I think that's the essence of altered art, is really the paint techniques that you use to bring everything together. I really feel that you can do anything you like with altered art as your base, but it's the painting techniques you use on top of it that really make it a really good cohesive altered art piece. Now, because it is a curved object, you may find that you'll need to do sections and wait for it to dry before moving on, and I definitely needed to do that for quite a bit of this, so it can take some time to actually build up the design. Now try your best to look past the colour in the things that you're adding onto the altered art piece, because often, depending on the painting techniques you put on top, the original colour won't even show through. So you can put anything you like, really, depending on how you plan to finish it off. Now this original one that I did, I actually liked some of the aspects of it, and wanted some of that to show through, so I did think about what I was using in that terms, that some of that would actually be visible. So if that's not the case, you can think about using other things that you might not otherwise use because they've got a nice texture to them. So once that was all done, I've just used an acrylic paint on this one with a paintbrush, because I've wanted to be able to wipe some of this away so that I had some of the beads and crystals showing through. I really wanted a lot of the black to stay, but then just those crystals and some of the buttons and things I wiped down carefully on the surface, just so that they would just peek through just a little bit. Now once I did that, I've actually then gone in with my gold wax. You guys will have seen me use this in a number of projects, and it's just a perfect medium for being able to do things like this altered art, because you can just touch over the higher aspects of the piece, and it gives it that really antiqued finish. So to keep all of my containers somewhat cohesive, because I knew they would be sitting together, I've used the same gold aspects as the base. I've used the crepe paper, these little gold paper doilies, and then some gold lace that I have in my stash as well. You could use any colour though whatsoever as the base, and then think about, as I mentioned, whether you want some of that to show through or not, and then use that as a way to decide what mediums you're going to use, either as the base or with the paint techniques that you put on top. These projects are a really great way to use up materials. So if you've got little bits and pieces that you don't know what to use them in, this could be the perfect sort of project for that. It's great for different little bits of offcuts. broken things, it's perfect to use little bits and pieces. I'm adding some little horns that came off a Christmas decoration, for example, and a lot of beads that I wasn't sure what to do with, and old bits of jewellery. So you can see the base of this container is very similar to the first one we did. I've used a lot of just leftover bits and pieces. It's very random looking, but I'm going to finish this one off very differently to the first one, so it will look entirely different once we're done. I ended up using the same lace for the bottom and the lid for each of these pieces as well, again as a way to make them look like they came from the same set, even though the designs on each would be very different. So for this one I'm using a spray paint. I want this to be much more covered than the first one. I used some magic tape over the handle because I don't want the gold or brassy details of that handle to be covered with spray paint. So just be careful of that if you are spray painting it. Then I've come in with a purple wax. This is an Art Alchemy wax, and it's a similar thing to the gold wax I was doing on my other piece. I'm just rubbing it over the tops of the design. You can see that the black is still in all the crevices, and that really gives it dimension. Once I was done with that, I went in with a Pearlex, and I went straight over it before the wax had dried, and then it really grabbed onto the wax. Otherwise you could mix this with your gum arabic and dry brush it on or something like that. I then go in with my Nuvo glitter paste, and this one is in a lovely purple colour, and I've just sort of used it on some of the lace bits and just to add a bit of glitter and some different element, you know, of magic to the piece. And to finish it off and make it really unique to the other one, I've glued on some little plastic crystals and little sequins as well. The plastic crystals were the same ones I used for my glowing crystal headpiece, so go and have a look at that video if you want to see where these came from. So for the third container, again the same base as with all the others. I'm using the crepe paper, the doilies and the gold lace, and that same sort of reddy brown or brick coloured lace that I used on the bottom and lid of each of the pieces as well. It's just a way to bring some sense of cohesive design across all of the 4 containers. Now this one I'm making a little bit different because I'm using shells to design this one. I had a whole lot of different shells that I've collected over the years in all different sizes, some of which I actually had from pieces that I'd pulled apart, vintage sort of shell pieces that I'd rescued the beads from, and then just some various shells that I've collected over the years from the beach and things. I'm using the Boyle's glue for this mainly. I like this glue because it's tacky, which means things hold on to the glue before it actually even dries, which can be handy for this curved container because things don't slide off as easily. They still can, and I did have to let it dry a number of times between doing different sides of the piece. Otherwise you'll find things will just slide right off the piece, and you really don't want that. So just be patient and let things dry if it needs to. And once I've glued on all my shells, I then go in again with the black acrylic paint, and I'm just painting over everything, not being too concerned about this being completely opaque, because again I do want to wash off some of this. I want some of the natural shell color to show through. Even though I will be adding various paint techniques onto this, I just want a little bit of that natural color to come through. So to finish this one off, I wanted to use a teal coloured. This is a metallic Creative Mates teal colour that I bought, and I thought the colour was perfect. If you don't have a metallic teal, but you have a gold colour, you could mix that with a bit of you know, green and maybe even a little bit of blue if you want it to be cooler in colour, and get a similar sort of effect. And once I'd done that, I put some green glitter over the top and then sprinkled some copper glitter on top of the green glitter glue. So you can get little tubes of like glue with glitters all through it for quite cheap, and they're great as a base for adding extra glitter as well. So if you want to then add to that green colour or whatever colour you've got, you can sprinkle another glitter over that before it dries, and then it'll dry down holding all of that glitter in place. So I really liked the look of the copper against the teal, and then I went in with a another Pearl-Ex in a inference gold. Now this final one, you guys know I've been doing all of these different things with plastic bugs, and I had some leftovers, so I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to use all of these little mini bugs and make them into an altered art piece. They're the perfect little size to stick onto a container, and it was a really fun project. This little container of bugs I got from Target for $3, so really great price. If you're in Australia, you might want to pick one up as well and give something like this a go. So exact same base, crepe paper, doilies, lace, and the trim on the top and bottom. And then comes the bugs. Now be careful if you use tape like I have. If it comes into contact with the paper, it will rip the paper. So I've really lightly pressed it onto the bug and then only pressed it onto the metal. And this was just really mainly because I was filming and wanting to move through this piece a little faster. If you're doing this at home, you could just do one side and let it dry. But I often use magic tape to allow me to move through more of the design and hold it in place if it's just waiting for that glue to dry. So once it was all dried, I've spray painted this one black as well. I wanted to fully cover all the different colourful bugs to make it more cohesive. You could, of course, do it differently and actually let some of those colours show through, and you'd get an entirely different design. So I decided to make this one a metallic red colour. Mainly I was just trying to pick colours that were very contrasting for each of my containers, and so I thought red was a perfect one for this. This is just acrylic paint. I did put a bit of gold paint into the red, and I've sort of done a bit of a dry brush, probably a little bit more paint than a regular dry brush. And then I went back over the bugs again with the red because I want them to stand out even more than the backdrop. Now after that I did put on again some of my Nouveau glitter paste. I have a red colour of this glitter paste, and then over the top I sprinkled a little bit of gold glitter. To finish it off and to really make the bug details pop, I decided to go over it with again my Treasure Gold wax, and this just really makes all of the details show up immensely. And that's the finished product. So I hope you guys have enjoyed watching me make these 4 different variations of the altered art containers. If you've got containers like this at home, give it a go. See what sort of designs you can come up with. It's a great way to use leftover materials, and you can have some amazing results using all sorts of different bits and pieces. Make sure you hit subscribe if you want to see more projects from me, and I'll see the rest of you next time in Faewood. Bye guys!